if somebody wants to write a book, what would be your advice? Go about it. I will give an example. So, out of the blue, I have this urge to write a book. I have no idea what it can be about. So, what would you recommend to start the motion of this process? So the idea comes.
Okay, my first comment is that there is a culture in the coaching community and the speaking community that you've got to have a book. I don't agree with that culture. I think you have a book if you have something to say and to teach. Don't have a book for the sake of it. I see too many rubbish books out there that don't reflect well on the person who wrote it. So, wait until you have something of value to add to the world, and enough to add. I've gone between my third book and my fourth and fifth books, I went 9 years. It's not, don't do it for the sake of writing a book.
No. That's my point, that I rejected that idea because I didn't want to write for the sake of writing. But what you have your 3 o'clock morning writing urges, I have this. So basically it's like I have this calling to write a book. I can feel it, and I'm surprised by it because I rejected the idea of writing a book. And now the book wants to come out, but it didn't inform what is going to be about.
So the second thing is, you need to understand what your core message is going to be. And you can think about that two ways. You can think about, what is it I want to say? So let's take Just Ask as an example. My book was designed to say, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to be vulnerable. Then who's my audience? Because that will then guide where you go with the book. So, our Just Ask was a bit more of a challenge for me because it's a crossover book for me. It's, my contract was with a business publisher, and I think that's where we ultimately fell short because they wanted a textbook. And I was never going to write that because I recognize the power to the individual of this book. So there's a very strong business focus, but it could be read by someone who's not in business at all quite easily, I would hope. But understand what your message is and who your audience is. And I think you can approach that either direction. What's my message? Who's going to read it? Or who do I want to appeal to? What have I got to say that will really resonate with them? Once you've done that, there are people out there. There's Mindy Gibbons-Klein, who I've worked with in the past. There's Sue Richardson. There's Joe Gregory. There are a number of people who offer their services coaching people to write books, high value, because it's good to have that support. So I would explore those options and see what's out there and what's affordable. The way I approach a book is, once I understand my premise, so the premise is the central point I'm looking for, I then mind map my chapters. So I mind map the chapters, and then I mind map within each chapter to about 3 or 4 key points and about 5 branches out. And if I mind map, and I learned this from Mindy, if I mind map to that degree, it almost drops onto the page. It does a lot of you create the skeleton of the book through that approach. The advice I also always give someone is understand how you want it published. And there are a lot of pros and cons of the different types. I've been published by Pearson, which is the biggest publisher in the world. I had this contract with one of the biggest independents and best known independents in the world. But actually my last 3 of my last 4 books published, so my second edition of one and then my 4th and 5th books, have been with Panoma Press, which is a small independent. That's Mindy Gibbons-Klein again. That gives me more control over the project. It maybe gives me less editorial feedback, so I might want to invest in an editor if I'm going down that route independently. It gives me a greater royalty, but I might have to pay something up front, whereas with Pearson and with the large independent, I had an advance. It gives me less clout in the market. Pearson had phenomenal clout on Amazon, and also got into W.H. Smith book shops everywhere. I was number 1 at all the airport W.H. Smiths was recommended. I haven't had a much bookshop presence through Panoma. So there's pros and cons to everything. And there's self-publishing, of course. With self-publishing, you do all the work yourself. I'm too lazy. I've got other priorities, in other words. But you make a lot more. So if you're going to sell at the back of the room, or you're going to sell them direct, it's much more worth your while. It costs me, £8 a book, more than £8 a book. So giving them away, we'd probably give close to 100 away at the beginning. It's going to cost me £1,000 more when you add the postage globally. So there's all these things to weigh up. The reason I say you need to think about that up front is if you approach a mainstream or a large independent publisher and say, I want you to publish my book, if you turn around and say, here's the manuscript, you might get knocked away straight away, because a number of commissioning editors want the ability to shape the project themselves. So what they want to see is a marketing plan, a structure outline, and the first 2 or 3 chapters so they can see your writing style, or they want evidence of your writing style. They don't want a whole book, because then they have no control on the project. So it's really important to do your research on your publishing options first before you go further with the book. I would be looking, if you wanted to go down the mainstream publishing route, I would be looking for similar books to yours. And if you said nothing like mine's been written, then forget mainstream publishing, because they want proof that it's. There's a reason why when Twilight came out, every other book was on vampire stories. When Harry Potter came out, every other book was on wizards. Same with films, because they know the market's there. They want proof of the market. So what I would do is find which publishers publish in your field, draw up a shortlist. I had a shortlist of 5 publishers for this book. Contact each individually and ask for their proposal document. How do they like their standard proposal? I went onto LinkedIn. I went onto their websites first, or I Googled and I found out who the commissioning editor was. I then went onto LinkedIn and I found out who I knew, who I knew who knew them. And then I asked for referrals.
Very good.
And I talked to every single one without going through a formal proposal process. So that would be my tips on getting started.
Thank you.